Hello everyone, and welcome to the VISTA Sponsor Orientation. This session is the first glimpse of the information and resources needed to carry out your new role as VISTA Project Director and Sponsor. We are extremely happy to have you with us today, and you will hear from two CNCF staff members throughout the presentation. My name is Eric Powell, and I'm an AmeriCorps VISTA Training Specialist at the Corporation for National and Community Service. I'm located in Washington, D.C. And as you can see on the slide, I served as a VISTA member in 2006 and 2007, and proudly as a VISTA leader in 2008 and 2009.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jillian Winters, and I'm a Louisiana State Program Officer with the Office of Field Liaison at the Corporation for National and Community Service. I work with our VISTA projects and our Senior Corps projects here in the state of Louisiana, and I also served as an AmeriCorps VISTA in 2009 to 2010 and served as a VISTA leader following that. Throughout our presentation, we may be joined by other CNCF staff who are assisting us with the chat panel and working together to provide you essential information and answer your questions.
So now that you know a little bit about us, let's learn a little bit about who's with us on today's webinar. This may also help you make connections with people geographically near you or who are working at similar organizations, as we know supervisors and sponsors like to connect with fellow peers. So take a moment and type your answers in the chat panel. What is the name of your organization? Where are you located, city and state? And what is your favorite springtime activity? As you type, we'll go ahead and answer the questions as well. You already know that Jillian and I both work for CNCF, and you know where we're located. I'll say that my favorite springtime activity recently has actually been going outside and taking photos of flowers. I love flowers and the photography of them, so to me that's a great experience. Jillian, what about you?
Well, I'm sure most of you are aware that springtime in Louisiana is absolutely beautiful, and it's the perfect time to be outside before it gets way too hot down here. So I love taking the opportunity to be outside and go to the many free outdoor concerts and festivals that Baton Rouge has.
That's great, and I'll quickly comment. I see a lot of people commenting from Washington, Kentucky, Georgia, all over the country. A lot of people are interested in hiking and outdoors activities, gardening. Someone from Utah, taking long walks at night. So these are great. As we expected, it's great to see a wealth of supervisors and sponsors from across the country. As you know, the VISTA program is in all 50 states and U.S. territories. And these springtime activities are wonderful. Makes me want to go outside right now. So thank you for that activity. I'm now going to turn it over to Jillian for a few more introductory comments.
All right, thank you. And yes, seeing these springtime activities is great because it has been raining all day here, so it's getting me excited for the weekend. All right, so we'll start with today's target audience. While this information is most relevant for VISTA project directors, we have designed this session so that everyone involved in the management and oversight of the VISTA project will gain valuable knowledge from reviewing this content. We recommend that VISTA project directors, project and site supervisors, and authorized representatives all review this content so your organization will be well prepared to manage a VISTA program. In our development, we are assuming that you are relatively new or even brand new to VISTA. In developing today's presentation, again, we are assuming that participants have looked at a number of materials ahead of time. These include VISTA 101 and 201, and then these materials are stored on the VISTA campus. Just to get a quick idea in the chat panel, can you type yes if you've completed them, no if you haven't started, or in progress if you've started but didn't finish? All right, I see quite a few. Oh, we've got a lot of answers here. It looks like there's quite a few who have completed it, also a fair amount who have not, and then we've got some in-progress people, so that is great. I do want to encourage you that these are very important resources, so if you have not completed them yet or if you're still in progress, please take the time to complete them. It's in your best interest so that you are situated for success as a VISTA sponsor. All right, so let's jump into our presentation. Eric, what are we going to cover today?
Great question, and I'd say the best place to start is, of course, the agenda. The session will focus on key pieces that will give you the initial information that you need to ensure your success as a VISTA project. So today we'll cover where to start. Many of you are looking for resources and people that can help you get your bearings in the world of AmeriCorps. Wondering about the big picture? We'll talk about an overview of CNCS, including the structure of national service, CNCS programs, our chain of communication, and the core principles of VISTA. Core responsibilities will cover your responsibilities relating to VISTA member support and project management, as well as important governing documents for our work together. Under Keys to Success, we'll provide tips, training, tools, and resources that are available, along with a sense of what success looks like. We'll conclude with next steps on where to go on your learning path, and we'll talk about how to wrap up, closing our session today, and a final time for questions and answers. As we mentioned in the handouts panel of today's webinar, you can download an optional one-page acronym list. Don't download the answers yet. So this is an activity for you to do during the webinar as we discuss various acronyms that are widely used in the VISTA program and CNCS. This list has a few obvious acronyms, such as VISTA, which I hope everyone knows, along with a few acronyms that only the seasoned VISTA project sponsors will know. Your goal is to fill in all the blanks by the end of this webinar based on the content and the information we provide during the webinar. And again, at the end of the webinar, you can download the answer sheet, and we recommend that you keep that handy because it's a good place to start, as you'll see and hear these acronyms used frequently, and it'll help you become better acquainted with our work.
All right, so where to start? If you are a new VISTA sponsor, it can be overwhelming to figure out what you need to know, where to find information, and who to reach out to for help. Here are a few key resources for you, and we will refer to these throughout the presentation today. And as a result of our presentation, we want to make sure that everyone on today's webinar will learn a core set of terms for VISTA project management, including many of those acronyms referenced. Right. You see here that this slide shows information or where to find information on a variety of topics. The resources on this screen will connect you to websites such as the CNCS website or the VISTA campus, which will connect you to various things, including publications. You should create a VISTA campus account if you have not done so already, and review the sponsor handbook and check out other VISTA sponsor and supervisor information available. eGrants, for instance, contains information about your application, VISTA assignment descriptions, reporting, and other topics. The resources on this screen will connect you to people and regulations as you seek support and guidance. The National Service Hotline is who you connect with on eGrants issues, questions about VISTA member pay and relocation benefits, and cost share billing. You would contact your CNCS state office for information about project compliance, issues with VISTA members, changing and approving badges, and anything else project related, or when all else fails. It's important for you to know what resources are available to you and where they are so that you can obtain the support you need in your VISTA project. These links and more are available in your VISTA Sponsor Resource Guide. As a reminder, you can find a link to the Sponsor Resource Guide in the Handouts panel. Along with getting a handle on the written materials that support you in your VISTA project, I want to underscore the importance of establishing communication expectations with your staff, VISTA members, sub-site staff if applicable, and CNCS. One way to avoid unforeseen issues and complications during the VISTA year is to establish a solid communication chain. In this task, your top resource will be your CNCS state office. The CNCS state office is able to provide a lot of support and also direct you to key tools and resources. Technical assistance from your CNCS state office can take many forms. For example, they can provide technical assistance for things like member recruitment, training, reporting, and other things you're responsible for. And they can offer support for you in member management and challenges. For VISTA members and supervisors with questions or concerns, you as the VISTA sponsor are the first line resource. For questions relating to benefits, you can direct your VISTA member to the VISTA Member Support Unit, or VMSU, the VISTA Member Handbook, and other resources on the VISTA campus. Depending on how your project is structured, it might be the case that you are the main point of contact for members and sub-site supervisors. If it's a question that you're not able to address, then you would contact your CNCF state office. Your CNCF state office has access to other departments and units at CNCS in the event that we need additional input. In addition to the resources included on the VISTA Sponsor Resource Guide, again on that Handouts panel, we want to highlight some key contacts and information that we want to make sure that you know about. On the top of your list, as you've heard me mention several times already, is the CNCF State Office. They are there to help ensure you have the tools, resources, and knowledge you need to lead a successful VISTA project. The VISTA Sponsor Outreach and Recruitment page referenced here should be one of the first places you go because it contains information about recruitment, marketing, fact sheets, and much more. Much of the material available on this page is print ready, so be sure to check it out and use it in your recruitment. The VISTA campus is filled with helpful tools and resources. You can find the member handbook and sponsor handbook there, as well as a variety of courses to help you through the life of your project. There's also a supervisor forum where you can have a dialogue with other supervisors from around the country. Many of the resources highlighted on our resource guide point you to the VISTA campus. We want to make sure that you create a supervisor account so that you can access everything referenced on the sponsor resource guide. The National Service Hotline offers support to you as well as your members and supervisors. They can help with common eGrants questions, reset passwords, etc. But they can also escalate calls to the eGrants Help Desk. Be sure to keep the eGrants support link handy, but remember that you can also call the National Service Hotline. The National Service Hotline will also escalate calls to the VISTA Member Support Unit, or the VMSU. The VMSU can troubleshoot member issues related to the living allowance or relocation payment issues and can answer questions about benefits such as child care and the Education Award. And the last bullet there, check out the website for gear and materials. That's pubs.nationalservice.gov. And on this website, you will find things like posters and brochures. And these resources are free and may prove very useful to assist in recruiting, talking about the VISTA program, and more. And also, just as an aside, eligible VISTA members do receive several free items after starting service. Approximately 2 weeks after the start of their service, they will receive an email with instructions on how to order specific free gear. Again, VISTAs love free things. We want to stress that we provide them, which includes a VISTA polo shirt, a t-shirt, a lapel pin, a tote bag, journal, and water bottle. These items are restricted to only VISTA members, and they must be ordered by the members themselves using the instructions that were sent in the email. However, there are lots of other materials and resources that you as a sponsor can order on the website.
During VISTA 101, you already learned about the VISTA program, its mission to empower communities to find solutions to eliminating poverty, and how VISTA members build capacity. If you have not completed VISTA 101 and VISTA 201, or especially if you're in progress working on them, please refer to the Sponsor Resource Guide in the Handouts panel. So let's start by taking a minute to discuss a few key principles that are central to the VISTA program. The Corporation for National and Community Service improves lives, strengthens communities, and fosters civic engagement through service and volunteering. As the nation's largest grant maker in support of service and volunteering, CNCS engages Americans of all ages and backgrounds in service to their communities each year through Senior Corps, AmeriCorps, and other programs. As you probably know, CNCS was created in 1993 and it engages more than 5 million Americans annually in improving communities through service. CNCS supports service at national, state, and local levels with a variety of service opportunities. Jillian will dive a little bit deeper into the work that CNCS does by discussing CNCS's program areas.
Thanks, Eric. Under the broad mission of CNCS, there are two main programming areas, which you can see on the screen. We have Senior Corps and AmeriCorps. Senior Corps was created in 1965 and includes 3 different programs to engage and serve senior adults in the United States. Individuals who are 55 and older can join the RSVP program. Senior Companions, or Foster Grandparents Program. AmeriCorps was created in 1994, and over 1 million members have contributed over 1 billion service hours across America. That is pretty incredible to me. As you can see, there are 3 different AmeriCorps programs: AmeriCorps State and National, AmeriCorps NCCC, and of course our favorite, AmeriCorps VISTA. CNCS state offices administer AmeriCorps VISTA and Senior Corps programs with your support. In Louisiana, for example, the CNCS state office oversees 12 VISTA projects with about 100 VISTA members awarded. We also oversee 20 Senior Corps programs that manage over 3,500 Senior Corps volunteers. This is just one of the many examples of how CNCS state offices are involved with programs within the states. All right, next we will turn our attention to the history of VISTA.
Let's talk about how VISTA started. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson declared a war on poverty and signed the Economic Opportunity Act. The act created Volunteers in Service to America, as we know VISTA, and other programs to combat poverty. VISTA is authorized under the Domestic Volunteer Service Act of 1973 as amended. The DVSA is a statute, and statutes define the legal boundaries within which the VISTA program may operate. In 1993, with President Bill Clinton's signing of the National and Community Service Trust Act, both CNCS and the AmeriCorps programs were established. The National Community Service Trust Act also merged several national service programs, including VISTA, to be part of AmeriCorps. The 2009 Edward M. Kennedy Serve America Act reauthorized and expanded CNCS's national service programs. Your specific VISTA projects were selected because they demonstrate a substantial connection to VISTA's mission, objectives, and principles. As you know, VISTA's mission is to strengthen organizations that alleviate poverty through volunteering and the mobilization of resources. VISTA is the only AmeriCorps program focused exclusively on fighting poverty. VISTA also has 3 very specific objectives of the program. First, to strengthen local agencies and organizations to carry out the purpose of the program. Next, to encourage volunteer service at the local level. And third, to generate the commitment of private sector resources. As you can see, VISTA's objectives directly support building capacity. And finally, these are the core principles that shape everything AmeriCorps VISTA does: anti-poverty focus, community empowerment, capacity building, and sustainable solutions. And remember that your VISTA projects were selected because they demonstrate a strong connection to VISTA's core principles. Now that you know the core mission and principles of VISTA, we will review some key terms and definitions. Remember that this information is based on VISTA's authorizing legislation, and it's important to understand how each role is identified. Project or VISTA project means a set of VISTA activities operated and overseen by a sponsor. Sponsor, project sponsor, VISTA sponsor, or VISTA project sponsor means a public agency or private nonprofit organization that receives assistance and is responsible for operating and overseeing a VISTA project. A public agency may be a federal, state, local, or a tribal government. Project director or VISTA project director is identified as a staff person of the sponsor who has been assigned by the sponsor the overall responsibility for the management of the VISTA project. Project directors are responsible for executing all aspects as outlined by the sponsor. Supervisor is a specific individual who directly supervises a VISTA member. This may be at the project level or at the site/subrecipient level. Project sponsors are responsible for ensuring all member supervisors are trained, and it's important to note that some project directors are also supervisors. The CNCS State Office, where Jillian works, has field staff working throughout the United States. There are CNCS state offices representing all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories. And please note that some offices are responsible for multiple states and territories. Next, I'll turn it over to Jillian, who will talk about how CNCF State Office staff can help with outreach, program development, technical assistance, monitoring, and evaluation in support of your VISTA project.
All right, it sounds like I have a lot to cover here. All right, so by now you should be familiar with your CNCF state office. Let's do a quick check to see who you work with. So if you know it, please type the name of your CNCF program officer in the chat. All right, if you don't know it, you can go ahead and put that you don't know in there so we can get an idea. All right, I'm seeing lots of my colleagues here, some familiar names. All right, we've got a few people who aren't sure. Oh, it looks like Ben Olson is a very busy person here. All right, so it's totally okay if you don't know who your program officer is. You will want to find out soon, though. So you can send an email to your entire state office staff using the two-letter state abbreviation followed by la@cns.gov. I'm going to repeat that one more time. You can reach your state office by using the two-letter state abbreviation followed by @cns.gov. For example, Louisiana would be la@cns.gov. As we said at the beginning, we know that a bunch of you on today's webinar are new to our work, so you may not have had a chance to connect with the corporation state office team yet. And as we discussed before, the CNCF state offices manage AmeriCorps VISTA as well as senior corps programs in our states. For VISTA projects, we help develop, support, and facilitate VISTA projects throughout their life cycle. State offices are here to sing your praises and help you through challenging times. We're available to help with member emergencies, troubleshooting, and policy questions. We can also support you by connecting you to resources and training tools for you and your members. One important note here. The CNCF State Office also plays a very important role in approving candidates for VISTA service and removing members from service, which hopefully will not happen to you, fingers crossed. As a reminder, only CNCF can approve members for service. The CNCF State Office carefully reviews all applicants that you recommend for VISTA service to ensure they're a good fit for the program. Likewise, CNCF alone has the authority to remove a member from service. This is one of the reasons why it's critically important for you to keep your CNCF state office up to date early and often when it comes to member issues. We'll talk more about the importance of documenting member performance and actions later. So your VISTA members are critical and necessary for the success of your VISTA program. I think that goes without saying. As you know, VISTA service is a 12-month full-time commitment. And when we say full-time, we mean at least 35 to 40 hours a week. VISTA members provide indirect service to build capacity and sustainability with programs that work to alleviate poverty. A few notes here. VISTAs are members. They are not employees, interns, or volunteers of or with the sponsoring organization. A note on how you refer to their service as well. VISTAs serve at their sponsoring organization. They do not work there. VISTAs receive a modest living allowance that aligns with the community they are serving. All right, now we will look at a few important topics for your members and those of us who support them. Members have questions on a variety of topics, and the topic of their questions often depend on how far into their service term they are. VISTA questions tend to fall under one of the categories on your screen, which are benefits, forms, end-of-service benefits, travel, and service letters. All right, we'll jump right into benefits. So this is common for members who are about to start service. They might have questions about the amount of their living allowance as well as when and how it's paid. Important information, we know. So don't forget to fully explain member benefits and address some of these topics while interviewing those highly qualified candidates. For example, some benefits such as the living allowance are available to all VISTA members. Other benefits such as relocation assistance and child care are only available to some VISTA members and require the VISTA member to take action in order to make use of the benefit. You'll want to be sure that all members carefully and correctly complete their W-4 and direct deposit information. Members should keep their direct deposit information updated, especially if they relocate for service and change banks, so that they can receive their living allowance and any approved travel, which is relocation, or emergency reimbursements. And remember that sponsors are required to reimburse members for any service-related travel that is required of them. For example, if the VISTA assignment description outlines that the VISTA member will be traveling to community meetings and setting up partnerships, sponsors must reimburse members at the rate your organization uses for reimbursement when they travel to those meetings. In addition to the required onboarding forms, VISTA candidates are required to accept the terms and conditions of VISTA service before they can start. This is an online course they take on the VISTA campus. Eric, since these are highlights of important things VISTA sponsors should understand in order to assist their member, perhaps you can walk us through a few more important topics for members.
Sure. It's a great idea, especially since newer members may have questions about how to request things such as federal forbearance on their education loans. They may also inquire how the end-of-service cash stipend differs from the Siegel AmeriCorps Education Award, or even how the Education Award can be used. One important note here is that it is important to distinguish the living allowance, which they get paid every 2 weeks, from the stipend, which is an end-of-service benefit. Members later in their service might need more information about how things like non-competitive eligibility, or NCE, works, or when they'll be able to access their verification of service letter. We will not go into detail about each of these, but this screen does show you numerous topics of interest to VISTA members. Ultimately, it's the responsibility of the VISTA member to understand the details around these benefits, including knowing how to use them, when to use them, and the details of the benefits. But it is useful for you to know the details around them so that you can support your VISTA members and inform candidates about their benefits during recruitment. You will find more details about these benefits on the VISTA campus website. And as you can see on the screen, here are some links to great resources for these types of questions. You can always access the VISTA Campus Benefits Hub, which is the first place to go for information about VISTA member benefits. We also direct VISTA members to this location as well. You can also always look at the VISTA Member Handbook, because that's where the information and guidance on these topics is located. Be sure to reference this as well as the VISTA Sponsor Handbook and the Resource Guide for links to more detailed guidance and policies. VISTA members also know that they have access to call the VISTA Member Support Unit, or VMSU, if they have questions specifically related to benefits that cannot be answered on the VISTA campus. Before we continue, we'll stop for a moment and see if there's any questions in the chat panel about what we've just covered. Do you have any questions about any of our websites, the CNCS website, VISTA Campus eGrants? Maybe you have questions about the role of the state office, key member topics, benefits. If so, please type them in the chat panel now. We have time to answer about 3 questions, and then we'll move on and leave time at the very end for more questions in the chat panel and verbally over the Q&A. So I see there's one question that came in relating to time and attendance, and the question is, our VISTAs work 30 hours per week. Oh, I just lost it. Not the 35 to 40 hours that you mentioned. So I'll quickly start answering that question, and then I'll turn it to Jillian for other comments. So yes, as Jillian mentioned, VISTAs do serve 365 days, and they are expected to serve full-time, which is usually 35 to 40 hours per week, based on your organization's full-time requirement. If your organization and or the VISTAs do not have a 35-hour week, it would need to be a discussion with your CNCS state office to see if that would be approved or if there's something else that can be arranged. Jillian, I don't know what your experience with this time and attendance around full-time has been.
Yeah, this is actually a very common issue that we run into. I will say that it is a federal requirement that this is served full-time, so there's not a ton of flexibility there, but definitely this is where the importance of reaching out to your state office and keeping them informed of issues like this is important, because they can help brainstorm what they can do to make sure that you're in compliance and that the work is being done that needs to be done, because ultimately we want our VISTAs to succeed and be able to serve. So they will work with you to make sure that that issue gets addressed and come up with some solutions for it. I also see here VISTA asking if there's a specific timesheet that has to be used. I'll go ahead and take that one. There is not a specific timesheet across the corporation that needs to be used. Typically, we have our sponsors use whatever timesheet method they employ. However, you might want to contact your state office to see if they have different reporting or tracking mechanisms that they use.
And I'll add that some sites do use an online timesheet software for their VISTAs. That is permissible as long as your VISTA is not coded as an employee in whatever that system is. Some organizations have a way to code them as a volunteer, which is fine, but they cannot be coded as an employee in any type of timesheet or software system. So another question we'll answer is, are we responsible to give VISTA members a copy of their handbook? That is a great question, but the answer is no, and I'll quickly answer it by saying all VISTA members, when they start service with the VISTA member orientation, they get several pieces of communication that direct them to the one and only place where their VISTA member handbook is located on the VISTA campus. So we do direct them to that, but if there are any questions, if you need to refer them to it, you can certainly refer them back to the VISTA campus to access the handbook, but from VISTA, you don't need to actually provide them a copy of it. Your site may have its own version of a handbook to provide to VISTAs as part of their on-site orientation and training, and obviously that would be something that you and your organization would have to organize and work out. So I see a few other people are typing, but I think we'll go ahead and move on and continue. We will have more time for questions at the end of the session, so please keep them coming. But right now, we'll take another look at our agenda to see what we've covered and what's coming up. For today, we've looked at where to start as a new project sponsor, the origins of the VISTA program, and some of the important details about the VISTA member positions. Next, we'll take a look at some of the core responsibilities that VISTA sponsors have. As a VISTA sponsor, you have joined VISTA sponsors from across the nation in the mission of fighting poverty in your community. Your role is critical to the success of the VISTA project, to the VISTA members, and ultimately to the impact on poverty in your community. As we mentioned before, every VISTA project is accountable for the responsibilities we will outline, but each sponsor may assign these responsibilities as appropriate within the organization and the project. It is the sponsor's responsibility to ensure that all subsites are in compliance with VISTA policies and procedures. Let's look at VISTA member management. A successful VISTA project starts off with a strong and effective recruitment plan, and I know many of you talked about recruitment earlier on. At a minimum, this includes creating solid VISTA assignment descriptions, or VADs, which guide VISTA members in their service throughout the year. It also includes drafting catchy and honest opportunity listings to announce your position and attract top quality candidates, as well as recruiting, screening, interviewing, and recommending the best candidate for service. And finally, it includes providing an in-depth on-site orientation and training to all incoming VISTA members at the beginning of their service, which includes the VISTA member orientation requirements, as well as fingerprinting instructions and deadline. This OSAT, on-site orientation and training, should also include opportunities for professional development and learning opportunities. We know that from our experience, really strong VISTA sponsors do this very well, and they also find ways to integrate various aspects of the organization and community with important things the VISTA members should know, as well as with the interests and skills of the VISTA member. Here are a few more important aspects of AmeriCorps VISTA member management. It's probably no surprise that the best projects offer day-to-day supervision and support of their members. This includes confirming that members have the space, supplies, and equipment necessary to carry out their service, providing reasonable accommodations to members who request them based on different abilities, and ensuring that members' activities are in alignment with their VADs. Even the best-run projects have member issues bubble up. So don't be disappointed if things get a little bit tricky, because the important thing is that you manage those member issues appropriately. What does that mean? Well, it means that you'll be addressing member issues as they arise, informing the CNCF State Office early of any issues that come up, documenting all discussions, tracking performance, and keeping on top of the situation. And remember, as Jillian mentioned earlier, only CNCS may remove members from your project, and only CNCS may actually terminate members. So your documentation of member issues and discussing them with CNCS State Office is very important. In terms of timekeeping, develop a system to track members' use of personal and sick leave, because it is your responsibility to monitor and manage the use of the VISTA members' leave time. You can visit the VISTA member handbook at any time for the rules regarding when it's permissible for VISTA members to use their leave. And in addition to the 10 medical and 10 annual days, VISTA members are also entitled to most holidays observed by your organization, but long-term seasonal breaks should be discussed with your CNCF State Office. In terms of data management, you'll want to have your members track what they accomplish, because this will certainly ensure that you have accurate data when it's time to report on performance measure targets. Consider creating a procedure manual or resource to keep track of steps that you or your VISTA members take when you develop and send out communications, updating an online website and flyer, and etc. These elements are all part of sustainability as you and your VISTA members identify things that you can do to help keep the project going well into the future. And as a reminder, the VISTA Sponsor Resource Guide, which is located in the Handouts panel, is a comprehensive list of resources to help you successfully manage your VISTA members. In addition to the topics we mentioned earlier related to performance and member management, the following activities are allowed but must be approved in advance. With prior approval by the sponsor and by the CNCF State Office, AmeriCorps VISTA members are allowed teleservice, which is serving at a location other than their project for limited durations. They're allowed to hold outside employment, and they're allowed to attend educational courses. However, even though these activities are allowed, the VISTA member must request this through the project director and then have it approved through the CNCF State Office.
All right, the CNCF State Office is always thinking about what's best for the project, and we have the ability to deny requests that may interfere with the VISTA member service or interfere with the project. To be safe, you should consult with your CNCF State Office if any changes are made that will impact the project, subsites, or members. This could mean a change with project personnel and supervision of members, or it could mean that due to emerging community needs, a VAD must be tweaked to better support alleviating poverty in your community. Regardless, it's always a good idea to check in with your CNCF State Office, and the sooner we know about these shifts, the more support we'll be able to give.
Now we'll take a look at some of the restrictions on what can be done during VISTA service. Prior to service, VISTA members must complete the online Terms and Conditions course that details what's provided to and allowed by VISTA members during VISTA service. If a member violates one of the terms or conditions, you will need to contact your CNCF State Office immediately. Different violations have different repercussions, and for the protection of the project and any other members on board, it's critical to act promptly. Criminal activity. VISTAs and VISTA sponsors must report any criminal activity that occurs while in service to their CNCF State Office. For religious activity, engaging in religious instruction, conducting worship services, or engaging in any form of proselytizing during service time is prohibited. And in terms of prohibited political activity, engaging in partisan political activities while in service, such as engaging in fundraising for a partisan political candidate at any time, or advertising oneself as a VISTA while engaging in partisan political activity, are all prohibited. The Hatch Act is a federal law that was first enacted in 1939, VISTA members are considered federal employees for a very few limited purposes, including the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act does ensure that federal employees and VISTA members do not participate in political activity prohibited under the Hatch Act. VISTA members also cannot be involved in voter registration as part of their VISTA service. They can do it if it's not part of their VISTA service, though, and they would just need to do it on their own time, not in VISTA gear, and not identified as a VISTA member. In general, VISTAs cannot engage in political activity, religious activity, lobbying, or union organizing as part of their service or while perceived to be a VISTA. They can go to rallies or attend church services on their own non-VISTA time, but again cannot engage in either type of activity while serving or while identifying as a VISTA. Also, whether during their service or on their own time, VISTAs are prohibited from fundraising, soliciting money for a partisan political campaign. However, they may personally donate to a partisan political campaign.
The next ones we have here are supplanting staff. So members should not perform duties that will be done or are typically done by paid staff or contractors. And nepotism, and I hope I'm saying that word right. We ask that you avoid the actual or appearance of favoritism in the operation of a VISTA placement. A VISTA member cannot be placed or assigned to a VISTA project site if the VISTA member is in the immediate family or close relative of a project site staff member or vice versa. And this is a big one, direct service. The role of VISTA is building capacity to bring communities out of poverty, and members do not perform direct service activities, except if needed during training, or doing so is merely incidental to performing their VAD in direct service duties. Here's an example. A member might design a after-school tutoring curriculum, but should not be the one regularly teaching children with the curriculum. It is not sustainable. Who would teach those children once the VISTA is gone? Instead, they can recruit volunteers to do that curriculum with the students once the VISTA has left. If you'd like more information or a full description of prohibited activities, please visit Chapter 15 of the Member Handbook. Now let's dive into some core responsibilities for project management. It's important to know that all sponsors must follow the requirements and policies set forth in the Memorandum of Agreement. Your organization has entered into a legal agreement with CNCS, and you can find that MA in your e-grants. All projects must have an anti-poverty focus. All project activities from the application to the VISTA assignment description should tie back to alleviating poverty in your community. And if your project is already underway, you might be responsible for the project continuation application. Be sure to submit your continuation application 90 days before the expiration of your MA or Memorandum of Agreement. And if you're not sure when that is, again, contact your state office. All right, so let's do a quick check-in. I got ahead of myself there. Take a minute to type in the chat if you know your project start date. All right, I see we've got lots of summer start dates here. All right, this is great. And just to clarify here, your start date is tied to your Memorandum of Agreement, not when your VISTA members actually come on board. So that can be a little confusing. So just make sure if you are not sure about that, that you check with your state office. Right, I think we're ready to move on to more project management responsibilities.
Thanks, Jillian. If your VISTA project operates at more than one location or service site, you are required to have a memorandum of understanding with each of your sub-sites, and you're also required to encourage partnership development. Depending on your agreement with CNCS, you might also be responsible for activities related to cost share. If you have questions about your agreement with CNCS, you can access the agreement in eGrants, or if you still have questions, talk to your CNCS state office for more explanation. Finally, it's great to know that everyone is responsible for reporting in some way. So we'll spend a little bit more time talking about reporting requirements.
Each VISTA project submits a set of reports to help CNCS review project progress. The information you provide in these reports demonstrates your project's impact, demonstrates your resource management, and allows us to provide you technical assistance. Next, Eric and I will talk through a variety of required reports. As we start, it's good to know that your state office will provide all deadlines for your reports and that you will be able to find instructions for those reports in the sponsor resource guide. All right, we're going to walk through the main reports required from VISTA sponsors, and just a hint, there's a lot of acronyms coming up. All projects are required to submit the Sponsor Verification Form, or SVF, the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, VPRS, VISTA Progress Reports, PPR, and Future Plans Forms, or FPF. Only projects that have a program or support grant have to submit a Federal Financial Report, or FFR. If you have a question about the type of grant you have with CNCS, access the Agreement and eGrants or talk to your CNCS state office. To begin with the SVF, or Sponsor Verification Form, every 2 weeks you will submit the Sponsor Verification Form. This helps CNCS track which members are still actively serving at your project so that we can prevent member overpayment. This information also ties in directly to VISTA member payroll for standard VISTA projects. Hopefully, this would not be the first time that you are informing your state office that a VISTA is no longer serving, but in case things do slip through the cracks, it serves as a safety net to prevent that overpayment. Please be sure to set reminders for this report, and if you're going to be out of the office, determine who is going to submit this report on your behalf. The function must be completed by a staff member. It cannot be delegated to another AmeriCorps member, an intern, a volunteer, or the VISTA member themselves. We'll move on to the Project Progress Reports, or PPRs now. For the first year of your project, these are generally completed on a quarterly basis. The reports should build on each other. So the first report would be for the first 3 months, then the 6 months, 9 months, and then the full year. You'll check with your CNCS state office and an eGrants for more details on due dates depending on your project year, because after your second year, progress reports are typically semi-annual. That transition is at the discretion of the state office, so you will want to double check that. The progress report information will be a part of your project's official record and will be used to evaluate a project's continuation. If you have questions on what you should include, I'll refer you to the PPR instructions in the VISTA Sponsor Resource Guide. If you're a project with multiple sites, you'll need to establish a way to aggregate information about members serving at those sites. So make sure you take a look at what information is needed before the due date so you know what you will need to be collecting. And again, don't wait until your progress report is due to ask a question or to share a member's impact. We encourage you to share information with your state office as it happens. That way, our state offices can help share your successes and coach you through challenges as they.
The next report I will mention is the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, or what we call the VPRS. This is an annual report, and it tracks demographic information specifically for your project. We typically have this report due late in the calendar year and is based on our agency's fiscal year. So, for example, October 1st of one year, such as October 1st of 2019 through September 30th of 2020. This means that you will likely have to track information with your members on a monthly basis to accurately submit this report. You can find instructions on how to complete this report in the VISTA Sponsor Resource Guide. You must complete a Future Plans Form, or FPF. We love our acronyms. And this form is for every member at the end of their term of service. And we'll give you a quick preview that the Future Plans Form does unlock in the my.americorps.gov system for each member about 90 days prior to their end of service. The member completes the first part, Part A, before they end service. Then you as the supervisor or sponsor will complete Part B, which evaluates the member's service. We recommend that you coordinate with the member's supervisor if you are not the one directly supervising this individual. Then, the VISTA member has the opportunity to review your comments. So, for that reason, we also recommend that you host an exit interview so that the member is aware of what you're entering for their review. Once those two sections are complete, the FPF eventually comes to the CNCF State Office for review. In terms of the Federal Financial Report, or FFR, for program and support grants, there is additional reporting requirements such as the FFR. Make sure that you connect with your CNCF State Office for more specific details on what is required of your specific grant. And be sure to loop in the fiscal staff at your organization as appropriate. If you don't have a program or support grant, you don't need to worry about this report. And finally, if you do have a cost share agreement, cost share invoices are payable upon receipt. You will receive them on a monthly basis through eGrants.
Now we'll go into some tips about these reports and forms. So as I stated earlier, we recommend you complete these forms and track the data early in the process. It can help you manage member recruitment and ties in directly to member and alumni benefits, specifically accessing the Education Award. For example, if a member wants to enroll or extend their service, then in the FPF, or the Future Plans form, you would document how they successfully supported your project and accomplished activities on their VAD and rate them accordingly. This will help the CNCF State Office evaluate your request and compare it to our budget. If a member needs to leave their service term early or terminate their service, the CNCF office can unlock the Future Plans form. However, as again with the SVF, the request to release this form should not be the state office's first notification that the member may be resigning or terminating their service. Please bring the state office into the conversation early so that we can help you troubleshoot any potential issues. I know this was a lot of information to absorb, so again, if you have questions, reach out to your CNCF state office. We are here to help and happy to help. Well, you've heard us talk about working with your CNCF state office quite a bit already. Another core responsibility, though, is to share the good and the bad and the ugly with your CNCF state office. By communicating openly, you position them to best support you. There are some things that CNCF state office needs to hear about promptly rather than when your next progress report is submitted. Please be sure to alert your CNCF state office of major accomplishments and events, such as new grant awards, visits from elected official, and press coverage as they happen rather than waiting for the next report. Your state office will want to hear about and spread the word of your success, and we do always look for success stories to pass on up the line of command here. Also notify them promptly of major emergencies, such as member hospitalization or arrest, a member being AWOL, a member early terminating, as well as any acute or chronic challenges with members, such as performance or conduct issues. Our state office is here to support you, and we need to stay up to date on your project status in order to do that effectively. Communicate with your state office about proposed changes to your project goals and member activities, i.e. any changes to the VISTA assignment descriptions, as well as shifts in staff, supervision, or organization status.
You will also want to share information about your VISTA project with your communities and your networks. Be sure to acknowledge the resources that you receive by identifying AmeriCorps VISTA members as such and listing AmeriCorps VISTA as a funder of your organization in your materials. Keep your communities and networks in the loop about your VISTA project to both spread the word on the capacity you're building, as well as to cultivate engagement and promote opportunities to serve with your organization. We're going to shift our attention now to regulatory compliance. As a VISTA sponsor, it is your responsibility to comply with all regulations and requirements of the VISTA program. Your CNCF state office conducts monitoring and compliance activities throughout the life of your project. Since AmeriCorps VISTA is a federal program, and like anything supported by taxpayer funds, we do need to ensure that the program is well run, doing what it's supposed to, and spending its money wisely.
CNCS staff ensure compliance by reviewing VADs to make sure they are appropriate for VISTA service and free from those non-approved activities we discussed earlier. CNCS staff may also conduct site visits and compliance monitoring visits. So let's break down the difference between those. Site visits are generally conducted by CNCS staff in the field. Occasionally, headquarters personnel might attend too. They may be informational in nature so that we can learn more about your project and show off the great work that VISTAs are doing. Or it may be for us to provide technical assistance. Or they might be for general project monitoring, just to make sure everything's going okay. Compliance monitoring visits are always scheduled in advance and are structured. They will most likely include interviews with project staff, VISTA members, advisory council members, and community members or beneficiaries. Compliance monitoring visits will include a review of documentation, such as the timesheets we discussed, and procedures. At the end, a letter outlining conclusions, recommendations for best practices, and any corrective actions needed is shared after. CNCS conducts these visits to make sure grantees are following the rules for AmeriCorps members and grant management, and to provide support to VISTA sponsoring organizations. You'll see that the VISTA members also have a role when it comes to compliance. It's important to know that CNCS instructs VISTA members who feel that they're being asked to do things that are not appropriate for their service to first talk to their supervisor. From there, they can talk to the state office if the issue isn't resolved. If the issue isn't resolved after that, or if they want to remain anonymous and they believe the matter relates to fraud, waste, or abuse, they can contact the CNCS Office of Inspector General. If a VISTA member believes they've been subject to illegal discrimination related to their VISTA service, they should immediately contact the CNCS Equal Opportunity Program, which we'll cover a little bit later. So remember to report concerns to your CNCS state office and that they are there to help develop, manage, and monitor your VISTA project. And we are here to support you in managing your project and your VISTA members. Like we said, we want our VISTA projects to succeed. We assist with member emergencies, challenging situations, and questions of policies, and we support you by connecting you to resources. We also talked about prohibited activities a little bit early in the presentation, so we're going to review a few important points again, just to make sure everyone is on the same page. VISTA members should focus on what's outlined in their VISTA assignment description, or VAD, and those activities should tie directly to the overall project plan that was approved by CNCS in your application. The VISTA service should be tied to capacity building, not undertaking activities that could be construed as direct service. If VISTA members are being asked to take over the work of staff, say someone who left the organization, that is, again, replacing or supplanting staff, and it's not allowed. Or if a VISTA member is doing mostly administrative support for someone else or work that is clerical in nature, that's also not appropriate work for a VISTA member.
So far today, we've covered the big picture of national service and talked through some of the major elements of VISTA sponsor responsibilities. But we've talked about that we want to make sure that you start off on the right foot and are ready for success. So we'll share some member and project management keys to how you identify and achieve that success. Here are a few recommendations for strong AmeriCorps VISTA member management. By now, it should be absolutely no surprise that ongoing communication with your CNCS state office is critical. Make sure that they're aware of any challenges as well as the successes. But let's take a look at a few other items. In terms of recruitment, be sure to start early and be proactive. Take time to locate members that are a good fit, do a thorough interview, know the VISTA member benefits, and understand what it means to live on the living allowance so you can pass that along to those VISTA candidates. You want to also invest time in drafting compelling and attractive opportunity listings to hook the right candidate and also maintain effective communication with them between the time you select them and the time they start service. Be sure to offer professional development and support. and develop a really strong on-site orientation and training during their first few weeks of service. This is an essential step of setting up VISTAs for a successful year of service and working towards VISTA retention. In terms of ongoing support and supervision, you want to address issues early on as their supervisor. Be sure to track their time and attendance, make sure they're avoiding direct service and other prohibited activities, and again, work with your CNCF state office if there is a request for outside employment, teleservice, or direct service. If you do have a VISTA leader, understand the role of a leader and utilize them to support your members. Make sure that you have regular, structured meetings with your VISTA members and show appreciation and recognition of the great work your VISTA members are doing. Think carefully about the close of service. You want to help prepare your members for their next steps once their service is complete. Let's shift and look at the top tips for success related to project management. Again, at the top of the list is ongoing communication with the CNCF state office, but you'll also want to be sure to operate your projects in accordance with applicable laws, regulations, policies, certifications, and assurances, with best efforts to accomplish the goals set out for the AmeriCorps VISTA members in the project application, and in consultation with and involving the people of the communities to be served in planning, developing, and implementing the project. Like all federal agencies, CNCF has an Inspector General whose office is responsible for preventing and detecting waste, fraud, and abuse. If you happen to encounter any issues with your project, address them at the sponsor level and, if necessary, with your CNCF state office. If the issues are not resolved, or if you want to remain anonymous, you may contact the Office of Inspector General. The Office of Inspector General does take all allegations seriously and conducts thorough investigations to ensure compliance with federal regulations and the terms of the VISTA program. VISTA members are protected by VISTA and CNCS from being subjected to discrimination or harassment. You also have an obligation to make sure that you do not subject anyone to discrimination or harassment. This applies to everyone you come into contact with, including VISTA members, contacts, clients, volunteers, and employees at your service site. CNCS's Equal Opportunity Office, or EOP, is responsible for and charged with reviewing and processing discrimination complaints filed by CNCS service members, including VISTA members. And with that, I will hand it back to Jillian to cover important next steps.
Great. We hope that today's presentation has given you a good sense of the role of VISTA sponsor and a sense of where to go next to learn more. So let's review next steps as we start to wrap up today. All right, step 1, following this webinar, please notify your CNCF state office that you completed this session. Again, if you're not sure who your program officer is, you can email the state at the 2-letter state abbreviation at cns.gov. Your state office will be able to answer your project-specific questions, such as who your program officer is, what your start date is, all those questions we covered earlier, and can review next steps as you continue to learn about VISTA, your project, and your roles and responsibility. If you are a sub-site supervisor, you should receive project-specific training from your project director. As you prepare to manage a VISTA project, take time to review the resources that have been shared with you, and most importantly, become familiar with the VISTA campus. And finally, there are many different learning opportunities, including self-guided webinars and live webinars 4 times throughout the life of your VISTA project. So please pursue those other trainings as directed by your CNCS state office and VISTA.
So we're almost at the end of the presentation, but we really want you to share your feedback on today's webinar. Before we get to the questions and answers, there's a survey link you'll see in the bottom middle box in the survey link box. You may automatically be directed to it, but if not, please take the time to share your feedback and encourage us to make these better for the future. Well, I will point out that the recording of today's presentation will be posted on the VISTA campus in approximately 7 to 10 days on the VISTA Sponsor Orientation Materials website. And as you complete the evaluation and provide your feedback, we'll take this time to answer a few of your questions. We know we've talked about a lot of information, provided you resources, but you may be uncertain about something, or perhaps you want to inquire about specific aspects of the VISTA program. We may not be able to answer every question, but please be sure to follow up with your CNCS State Office Program Officer after our webinar if you have additional questions. So now is the time to ask what questions you have. Remember, as you've been doing, you can type your questions into the chat panel, and Jillian and I will get to those in a second. But first, I will invite our partners at LSI to provide instructions as to how you can verbally ask a question over the phone.
Thanks, Eric. If you dialed into the webinar or had Adobe Connect call you back, you can ask questions using your phone. To ask questions over the phone line, press *# and you will be placed into the queue. When it's your turn to ask a question, you will hear the prompt, "Go ahead, caller." Then you may proceed with your question. Once again, to ask questions over the phone, press *# to be placed in the queue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll start with questions we have in the chat. I'll go ahead and answer the first one, and then I'll turn the second question over to Jillian. But the first question was about, earlier Jillian and I talked about 10 personal and 10 sick days for service, and the question was, I thought it was 15 total. In the VISTA Member Handbook, it outlines that VISTA members do for their entire 365 days of service. They receive 10 personal days that can be used for personal vacation, or that 10 personal days can be used as additional sick time. And then they also get 10 sick days. So a total of 10 personal plus 10 sick days. And again, you should be tracking that time, but also inform your CNCS state office if it looks like the VISTA member is getting close to exhausting their leave, or if they're AWOL or other. Definitely be in touch with your state office about that. The next question that I believe I'll turn over to Jillian to answer, because I think her expertise has it quite well, is, do we have to submit the VISTA progress report? And I think this refers to the project progress report, the PPR that we talked about earlier. Do we have to submit that report if we have been awarded an AmeriCorps grant but do not yet have VISTA members started?
That is a great question, and the answer is yes. Again, double check with your state office on your reporting dates, but the reports will show your reporting period, so generally those first 3 months will be covered by your first report. If there are no VISTA members serving, that is where the narratives in the PPR become important. So in the narratives, we ask you about challenges you're experiencing, recruiting, things like that that will be more important in the beginning rather than later in the project. So that's why we still request those, even though there's not members serving. And I also saw a question, really quick, just to jump in here. Someone had asked about defining teleservice. So just to clarify, that's typically defined as, to use general terms, working from home. Even though we don't call it working, we call it serving. But typically teleserving is defined as working somewhere other than the site or off-site doing their VAD activities, such as a community meeting.
Great. Related to serving, there was a question about timesheets. Are they managed by the site only? So obviously, it's in the best interest of you and the organization that whoever the direct supervisor is of the VISTA member, typically that person is the one who keeps the timesheet because they're the ones who see the VISTA and know the VISTA is there. Obviously, that's if you're an intermediary site and you're one supervisor and there's supervisors across the country, you can communicate that information to your project director or project sponsor. But yes, typically it is the direct supervisor who's responsible for maintaining the timesheet for the VISTAs and keeping track of their leave. There was another question that Jillian and I will be able to answer for you, and that was, will CNCS send a list of all reporting required, including due dates, or is it a responsibility of the program director? Do you want to take that one, Jillian, or do you want me to?
Sure, I can jump in if needed, but you can start us off.
Sure. So in terms of required reporting, and it's a great question because as we mentioned, there's the big ones, the PPR, the Project Progress Report, which is quarterly or semi-annually. Then there's the VPRS, the VISTA Project Report Supplement, that's annually. And then there's the Sponsor Verification Form, which is every 2 weeks. So in terms of the PPR and the VPRS, the reporting due dates and requirements should all be in your eGrants account. When you log in, you go to the bottom right corner and click on Portal Home. You should see all the reports that are required. If your grant has been awarded and you're all set to go, those details should be in your eGrants account. If they're not there, or if you have additional questions, or if something looks odd, definitely contact your CNCF state office right away, and they'll be able to explain or assist you. But for those two reports, the PPR and the VPRS, they're in eGrants. In terms of the sponsor verification form that you would submit every 2 weeks to show that VISTA members are still serving or update their status, that's just every 2 weeks, so there's not a reporting due date. It's just every 2 weeks, and you'd submit that in eGrants.
I will jump in and say for the sponsor verification form, it may depend from state to state, but when we send out reminders, it is not a good thing. It means that it's late and that we need it immediately. So stay ahead of the game, set those calendar reminders since it's due every 2 weeks. It only takes a few minutes to do so that you don't have to be on the naughty list for that. I also seen a question here about any examples for creating a procedures manual. So again, that is a great question where we're going to go back to the line we said over and over again about contacting your state office. It really depends on what your VISTA sponsor and your project looks like. So your state office would be able to either point you in the right directions for resources for your specific project or connect you with strong projects that are already in their state and get some of that networking going. So definitely reach out to your state office for that question.
And I'll add to that by saying, I know pretty much most of you are likely new VISTA sponsors or project directors, but some of you may have been around for a little while, or maybe you're new, but the project started a little while ago. If you have answers to some of these questions from your colleagues, like how you create a procedures manual or things you've done, certainly share those in the chat, because we do also, as someone mentioned earlier, want to make this work for you. We want to make sure that you're able to use the discussion forums on the supervisor section of the VISTA campus, because we find that supervisors get a lot of information and resources from their peers. So definitely look at that. Right now I'm seeing no callers on the phone, so we'll definitely stay here for a couple more minutes to answer questions. I see some people typing in the chat. One thing I'll bring up that oftentimes comes up on this webinar, and it might be what someone's typing in now, is how do you effectively bridge or manage the site supervisor / intermediary project director relationship? And as we mentioned earlier, in addition to having a memorandum of understanding with your sites, it's a really good idea to set up a phone call or a meeting to explain how the intermediary project is set up, almost like an organizational chart, who the primary project director is and who all the site supervisors are, to really establish that relationship in terms of, because there was a question that came in earlier about, as a site supervisor, am I able to contact the CNCF state office myself, or do I have to go through the intermediary? From our perspective, you all have access to contact the state office, but it might be that your intermediary prefers that communication first gets funneled through them, and they contact the CNCF state office. So those are definitely great questions to have with your intermediary or your project director to make sure that you're building a successful relationship. And again, just as we talk about open lines of communication with your CNCF state office, if you are an intermediary, be sure to have open lines of communication with your site supervisors and your project director. I see a few more people typing, so I'm waiting just a second to see what other questions might come in. The other question that comes up on this call that might be useful for many of you is about reporting, and it's kind of a general question is, what are the best practices for reporting, and do we have any tips? So yes, and I'll start by saying One, as Jillian mentioned earlier, make sure to put on your calendar a reminder every 2 weeks to submit the sponsor verification form. And again, if you're going to be out, make sure you assign someone else to do that so that the state office does not have to track you down and wonder what's going on. In terms of the other reports, it's strongly recommended that you type and answer the questions to the reports in Microsoft Word and save it to your computer so that you can simply just copy and paste it into eGrants. If you just start out typing it in eGrants, for security reasons, eGrants have the tendency to time out and log you out after a certain period of time of inactivity. And I'm sure you'd be very upset if you're typing everything in there and you lose it. So type it in Word, save it to your computer. The other recommendation is just due to our systems. I know you're all cringing when I say this, but currently our systems have eGrants best suited for using with Internet Explorer. Someday we'd like to make it accessible to all browsers, but there are some features that are best utilized in Internet Explorer when you're using eGrants. And then the other thing I'll mention about reports that has been a good suggestion from other supervisors is don't feel like you have to do everything on your own. Oftentimes we have VISTA supervisors who will kind of take a snapshot of the report and send it to their VISTA members and ask their VISTA members to fill in at least some of the information, at least on a monthly basis, because it helps the VISTA keep track of their accomplishments. The VISTA can then use it later on their resume and other things as professional skills building and professional development to showcase what they've done. But then it also oftentimes makes it a lot easier for you to compile the master report. You're not typing everything from scratch. You're compiling essentially everything that the VISTA members typed in, and that way it makes it a little bit easier for you. So don't always feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. Take suggestions from other supervisors and people as well. So I'm scrolling through. I don't see, there's a question about will the transcript of the session be available? Typically not, but I can make it available, so sure, that's an easy thing to do. I'll make sure that I'm assuming you mean the transcript of the chat / the questions that were asked, because in terms of the PowerPoint, a copy of the PowerPoint slides is located in the handouts panel. So in a minute, I'll ask LSI to make the handouts panel available again, just so you can download that if you haven't. But in terms of the chat, I can make sure that the questions that were asked and some of the responses are accessible. If there are no remaining questions, we don't want to belabor the point. What I'll do is I will go ahead and move forward to the next screen. If you do have questions, you can still type them in the chat, and Jillian and I will be able to answer them in the chat in the next couple of minutes as we move forward. But as you see on the screen, we talked about the acronym list earlier. We're hoping most of you did really, really well. You can feel free to quickly type in the chat if you got them all or how you did. But obviously, in a minute, you'll be able to access the handouts panel again and download the answer key. And again, this answer key is something we recommend you hold on to because a lot of these acronyms will be used frequently by your CNCS state office and by the VISTA program. Remember to keep this handy. And again, you might get questions from VISTA members about some of these acronyms, especially as we talk about CNCS, the VAD, the VMSU. So definitely be well informed about how and what these acronyms mean. So as we move forward to the next screen and look at the final steps, we know we've covered a lot of ground today, and hopefully our discussion has given you a good starting point as you jump into your new role as VISTA sponsor. Remember that if you have any questions at all as you continue to do this great work with AmeriCorps VISTA, your first and best point of contact is your CNCS State Program Officer. So as we conclude, I want to say thank you to my wonderful co-presenter Jillian for her work, for her effort, and for answering questions. Thank you to Barbara Reynolds for helping monitor the chat, as well as our CNCS staff, and our partners at LSI for managing the webinar technology. We, of course, also want to thank you not only for joining us today, but especially for occupying the very influential and critical role of VISTA project sponsor and director. Your work makes a huge difference to the VISTA program, to the VISTA members, and to your community. This does